When you first hear the words, jet engine, your mind immediately pictures the roaring beast strapped beneath the wings of a massive passenger airplane, tearing through the skies at hundreds of miles per hour. You don't think of it strapped to something smaller, something unexpected, something that looks like it doesn't belong. That's why the very idea of taking a jet engine and using it in a personal experiment is so fascinating, so shocking, and so captivating. Imagine walking into a dusty workshop where grease stains tell stories of late nights and endless tinkering. And right there in the middle of it all stands this gigantic cylindrical monster of polished steel and blackened exhaust pipes. Its very presence commands attention. It doesn't just sit there, it feels alive, as if the slightest spark could wake it up and unleash its raw, untamed power. Now picture the man behind this crazy experiment. He isn't a billionaire scientist in a shiny laboratory. He isn't backed by a military budget worth billions. He's just an ordinary engineer, or maybe even just a passionate hobbyist, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. He knows what he's doing is insane. He knows jet engines aren't designed for cars, or trucks, or even workshops. They belong in the skies, suspended on wings, carrying people across continents. But that's exactly what makes this spectacle irresistible. It's forbidden, it's unusual, and it's the kind of idea that only someone both fearless and slightly reckless would ever attempt. The moment of ignition is a performance all on its own. The entire room seems to hold its breath as the first whine of the starter kicks in. It's high-pitched, sharp, and almost alien compared to the deep growl of normal engines. People watching don't know whether to cover their ears or lean closer. The sound builds, climbing higher and higher, until suddenly, "Achoo-whoosh!" a blast of hot air shoots from the back, and flames dance for a brief second like an angry dragon warning the world that it's awake. The crowd of onlookers gasps, and even the person who built it can't help but smile in disbelief. He actually did it. But the spectacle isn't just about fire and noise, it's about raw, terrifying force. A car engine might rumble and shake. A jet engine screams and pushes with a violence that's hard to describe unless you've felt it in your bones. When he throttles it up, the very ground seems to vibrate. Dust lifts into the air, tools on a nearby table rattle and fall to the floor, and the shockwave slams into your chest, as though the engine is trying to shove you backward. It's not just mechanical power. It feels like nature itself has been bent to man's will, as if thunder and wind have been bottled up and released on command. There's also something strangely beautiful about it. The flames licking out of the exhaust are tinted blue and orange, shimmering with heat, and the metallic casing glows faintly as if it were alive. Sparks flicker, smoke trails rise, and every sound feels like the opening note to some industrial symphony that no human composer could have written. Even the danger adds to the beauty, because everyone watching knows that if something goes wrong, if a single bolt gives way or a fuel line bursts, the results could be catastrophic. That risk amplifies the thrill, turning the whole experiment into a high-wire act without a safety net. And then there's the reaction of the audience. Some shake their heads in disbelief, convinced that this is madness. Others can't take their eyes off it, mesmerized by the sheer audacity of strapping an airplane's heart into something that doesn't belong in the skies. A few record every second on their phones, eager to share the chaos with the world. For them, it's not just an experiment, it's a story to tell, a memory etched into their minds forever. But maybe the biggest spectacle isn't what happens in that moment, but what it represents. It's proof that curiosity and daring still exist in a world that often feels too safe, too predictable, too polished. It's the embodiment of human nature, the need to push limits, to do what others say is impossible, to test the boundaries between genius and madness. It makes you wonder, if people like this never took risks, would airplanes have ever been invented? Would rockets have ever reached the stars? Maybe this jet engine in a workshop is small compared to those milestones, but it carries the same spirit. It's a spark of that same fire that drove the Wright brothers, Elon Musk, and countless nameless inventors before them. The spectacle of this experiment is unforgettable because it doesn't just show us a machine, it shows us ourselves. Our hunger for more, our refusal to accept limits, our thrill in chasing the impossible. And as the jet engine roars louder, drowning out every other sound, there's a moment when everyone watching knows they're witnessing something rare, something outrageous, something that should not exist. And yet it does. That's the magic. When you see a jet engine roaring in a place it doesn't belong, a small garage, a parking lot, or a makeshift workshop, it's not just fascinating, it's terrifying. Beneath the spectacle, there's a real sense of danger. The kind of danger that isn't just imagined, but very real, measurable, and immediate. A jet engine is not designed to sit quietly on the ground while curious people stand a few feet away. It's designed to propel tons of metal through the skies at supersonic speeds. It drinks fuel like a monster, creates exhaust hot enough to melt steel, and produces a thrust so violent that standing behind it could literally knock you off your feet, or worse. That's why this experiment feels so much like dancing on the edge of a knife. Imagine the moment the builder hits the ignition switch. Everyone nearby knows that one mistake, just one loose bolt, one cracked fuel line, one miscalculation in airflow, could turn the whole thing into a disaster. The flames shooting out of the exhaust aren't just for show. They're hot enough to scorch anything within range. If you stand in the wrong spot, you don't just feel the heat, you risk getting burned. The noise itself is deafening, so loud it rattles your eardrums and makes your chest vibrate, a reminder that you're standing next to something designed for the sky, not for human comfort. But it's not just fire and noise that make it dangerous. It's the unpredictability. Jet engines are incredibly complex machines, with spinning turbines moving at insane speeds. If something inside shatters, those shards of metal don't just fall to the ground. They can shoot out like bullets, slicing through anything in their path. That's why in professional settings, jet engines are tested inside massive reinforced chambers, with thick glass and steel barriers between them and the people who run them. Yet here, in this backyard or this workshop, the builder has none of those protections. He's relying on his calculations, his hands, and maybe a bit of luck. And then there's the fuel. Jet engines don't sip gasoline like a car. They gulp down kerosene or aviation fuel in huge quantities. Handling that fuel is dangerous by itself. It's volatile, flammable, and unforgiving. Spilling just a little on the floor near the hot exhaust could turn the entire place into a fireball. The smell of the fumes is sharp and heavy, and the people standing close cover their noses. But deep down they all know that the real risk isn't the smell. It's what could happen if a spark lands in the wrong place. Still, there's something magnetic about watching danger unfold in real life. People can't look away. It's the same reason crowds gather around stunt shows or extreme sports. They want to feel the thrill without being the one taking the risk. And as the engine roars louder, the audience gets a taste of that danger in their bones. They see the flames, feel the ground shaking, hear the metallic scream of turbines spinning faster and faster, and they can't help but imagine the what if? What if it explodes? What if it lifts off the ground? What if something goes horribly wrong? That uncertainty adds a layer of adrenaline that makes the whole thing unforgettable. The builder himself isn't blind to the risks. You can see it in his eyes. He wears safety goggles, heavy gloves, maybe even a fireproof suit, but deep down he knows he's only partially protected. If something catastrophic happens, there won't be time to run. That's part of what makes him so fascinating. He's willing to stand in front of danger and take that gamble, not recklessly, but with a strange mix of courage and obsession. He believes in his work enough to put himself on the line, and that commitment is what separates dreamers from doers. But even with all the danger, there's also a strange sense of control. The builder knows every nut and bolt, every wire and fuel line. He's memorized the order of operations. He's tested every system, and he trusts his creation. The danger doesn't scare him into stopping. It sharpens him. It makes every movement deliberate, every adjustment careful, every glance at his gauges meaningful. To him, the danger isn't a reason to quit. It's proof that what he's doing matters. If it weren't risky, it wouldn't be worth it. And that's what makes this experiment more than just a backyard stunt. It's a symbol of humanity's relationship with danger. Every breakthrough, from the first airplane to the first rocket, carried enormous risk. People died trying to push machines further than they were meant to go. Yet because of those risks, humanity flew, humanity reached space, humanity evolved. This jet engine experiment is a small echo of that history. It's not just about building something cool. It's about proving that danger doesn't stop progress, it fuels it. At the end of the day, when the flames die down and the deafening roar fades into silence, everyone breathes easier. The engine didn't explode. The fuel didn't ignite. The experiment didn't end in disaster. But the memory of that danger lingers in the air like smoke. People leave knowing they saw something that wasn't just exciting. It was risky, reckless, and brave all at once. And maybe that's why they'll never forget it. Every extraordinary machine has one thing in common. It doesn't exist without passion. Behind every roaring engine, every wild invention, every insane experiment that makes the world stop and stare, there's a human being whose heart beats a little faster at the thought of pushing boundaries. And in the case of this jet engine experiment, the passion is almost louder than the engine itself. You can hear it in the builder's voice when he explains what he's doing. You can see it in his eyes when the turbine begins to whine. You can feel it in the energy of the room when he throws himself into something that most people would laugh off as impossible. Passion doesn't always make sense to outsiders. To someone watching from a distance, it might seem reckless, even foolish. Why would anyone put a jet engine in a place it doesn't belong? They might ask. But that's the thing about passion. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need to fit into a neat little box. It's that burning obsession that keeps a person awake at night, sketching ideas on scraps of paper, replaying designs in their head, rehearsing the sound of ignition before it ever happens in real life. Passion is the fuel that no machine can run without. Think of the countless hours that went into this moment. Long before the jet engine ever roared to life, there were nights spent poring over blueprints, afternoons spent welding parts, weekends lost in trial and error. For most people, work ends when the clock runs out. But for someone like this, the work is life. Passion doesn't have an off switch. It's there in the quiet moments. It's there when friends are hanging out and he's still thinking about torque and airflow. It's there when people call him crazy, but instead of arguing, he smiles, because deep down, he knows they'll never understand. And when ignition finally comes, when the roar of the turbine fills the air, all those hours of dedication come together in a single moment of triumph. That's what passion feels like. It feels like defying the odds. It feels like taking an idea from your imagination and making it scream into reality. The fire, the noise, the vibrations. They're not just the sounds of a machine. They're the heartbeat of someone's dream coming alive. What's fascinating is how contagious passion can be. Look around at the onlookers. Some came out of curiosity, some came to mock, but now, Every single one of them is captivated. They can't look away. Even the skeptics, the ones who rolled their eyes before, are leaning closer. They feel it too. They don't just see a jet engine. They see a person who refused to accept limits, and that lights a spark inside them. For a moment, they're reminded of their own dreams, the ones they buried because someone told them, "It's not possible," or "It's too risky." That's the true power of passion. It awakens something in everyone who comes near it. But passion also comes with sacrifice. This experiment didn't happen by accident. It cost money, it cost time, it probably cost relationships. People with passion often walk a lonely road, because not everyone wants to follow someone into the unknown. Nights spent in the workshop are nights not spent at family dinners. Weekends consumed by building are weekends lost with friends. Passion demands everything, and in return, it gives back something priceless: meaning. To the builder, the sacrifices are worth it. The jet engine isn't just metal and fire. It's proof that he chose to chase meaning instead of comfort. And that's why this experiment resonates so deeply, because we all recognize passion when we see it, even if we don't understand the details of turbines and thrust. We see the fire in his eyes, the determination in his stance, the grin that spreads across his face when the engine roars, and we feel it. We feel that pull toward something bigger, something bolder, something we can call our own. That's why people watch videos like this. They're not just watching machines. They're watching human passion in its rawest form. In the end, the passion behind the jet engine experiment is what makes it unforgettable. The noise fades, the flames die down, the smoke clears, but the story remains. The story of one person who loved an idea so much that they refused to let it go. Who ignored the voices saying it couldn't be done. Who poured heart, soul, and sweat into making the impossible possible. That's what people will remember long after the roar has ended, not just the engine, but the passion that made it roar in the first place. At first glance, a jet engine roaring in a workshop looks like chaos. Fire, smoke, ear-splitting noise. It seems like madness, pure and simple. But if you look closer, beyond the flames and the drama, you start to see something else. You see the fingerprints of innovation. Because this experiment, crazy as it might seem, isn't just about making noise or pulling a stunt. It's about reimagining what's possible, taking technology built for one world and dragging it into another, asking the question nobody else dared to ask: what if? Innovation always begins with that question. What if we tried it differently? What if we combined two things that were never meant to meet? That's how every breakthrough in history was born. Airplanes themselves were once mocked as ridiculous. Rockets were dismissed as science fiction. Computers were called toys. And yet, someone with a curious mind refused to listen. This jet engine experiment is cut from the same cloth. It takes a machine designed for the skies and wonders what would happen if it lived on the ground. Look at the details, and you'll see innovation everywhere. The way the fuel system has been adapted, rerouted, and recalibrated to work outside its intended environment. The way the engine mount has been engineered to hold something never meant to be bolted down like a car motor. The custom-built controls, the sensors repurposed from other devices, the clever workarounds for airflow and cooling. All of it screams creativity. It's not a simple plug and play. It's a puzzle with 1,000 pieces, and every piece has been forced into place by human ingenuity. Innovation doesn't always look clean and polished. In fact, it often looks messy. There are wires that seem out of place, welds that look rough, brackets that feel improvised. But that's the beauty of it. Innovation lives in the rough edges, in the compromises, in the good enough to try. The perfection comes later. What matters first is proving that it can be done. And that's exactly what this jet engine experiment does. It proves the impossible isn't quite so impossible after all. There's also a kind of rebellious innovation here. Jet engines are supposed to belong to aerospace companies, defense contractors, and billion-dollar labs. They're supposed to be guarded by regulations, locked behind closed hangars. But here, in a workshop that smells of oil and burnt rubber, innovation has broken free. It says you don't need a massive budget or a government contract to dream big. You just need grit, creativity, and the willingness to try. That's the heart of true innovation. It doesn't wait for permission. And what's truly fascinating is the ripple effect of innovation like this. The people who watch might not walk away wanting to build a jet engine themselves, but they'll walk away inspired to innovate in their own way. Maybe it's a kid who sees this experiment and decides to tinker with drones. Maybe it's an engineer who suddenly thinks differently about hybrid engines. Maybe it's someone who's been afraid to try their own crazy idea, and now they finally take the leap. Innovation is contagious. It spreads from one spark to another until suddenly the whole world is brighter. Of course, innovation also comes with failure. This experiment probably didn't work perfectly the first time. There were likely moments when the engine refused to start, when something broke, when smoke poured out for the wrong reason. But innovation thrives on failure. Each mistake is a step forward, a clue, a lesson. That's why innovators don't give up when things go wrong. They expect it. They welcome it. They know that every setback is just the universe whispering, try again, but smarter. That's why this jet engine experiment is more than entertainment. It's a demonstration of innovation in its rawest, purest form. It's messy, it's dangerous, it's loud. But it's also brilliant. It takes something we all thought we understood and flips it upside down. It makes us look at a jet engine, not as a fixed piece of technology, but as clay that can be reshaped, reimagined, redefined. That's innovation at its core, refusing to see things as they are, and daring to see them as they could be. And maybe that's the legacy of this experiment. Not just the roar of the engine, not just the fire and smoke, but the idea that innovation doesn't belong to boardrooms and laboratories. It belongs to anyone willing to ask, what if? And bold enough to chase the answer. Every bold experiment lives on the edge of a balance beam, where one side is failure and the other side is triumph. The jet engine experiment is no different. To some, it looks like madness, too risky, too unpredictable, too dangerous to ever be worth it. But to others, it's pure brilliance. Because in the world of invention, risk and reward are forever locked in a dance, and the roar of this jet engine is the music that keeps them moving. Imagine the scene. The engine sits waiting, a massive hunk of steel and firepower not meant to be in this space. The builder stands close, hand hovering over the ignition, sweat forming on his brow. The risks are obvious, everyone can see them. Fuel lines could rupture. Turbines could shatter. The heat alone could start a fire in the workshop. And even if nothing catastrophic happens, the noise and the vibration could damage everything nearby. For many people, those risks would be enough to shut the whole project down before it even began. But here's the thing. Risk and reward are two sides of the same coin. Without risk, there is no reward. And for the builder, the potential reward is worth every heartbeat of fear. It's not just about the machine starting up. It's about proving that it can be done. It's about being the first to try, the first to succeed, the one who stood in the face of risk and claimed victory. That's the kind of reward you can't put a price on. Of course, the risks don't end at ignition. Once the engine roars to life, every second feels like a gamble. The reward is in the thrill, the fire, the spectacle, but the risk is right there too, hiding in every vibration and every spark. The onlookers feel it. They hold their breath, torn between excitement and fear, not sure whether to cheer or to cover their faces. That tension is what makes the moment unforgettable. If it were safe, it wouldn't be worth watching. But beyond the physical risks, there's another layer, the personal risks. This experiment cost money, and lots of it. Jet engines aren't cheap, and neither is the fuel they consume. The builder has poured not just hours, but savings into this machine. If it fails, the money goes up in smoke, literally. There's also the risk of reputation. To some, he's a genius. To others, he's reckless. If the experiment goes wrong, the critics will say, "We told you so." And that sting can sometimes hurt even more than financial loss. Yet none of those risks are enough to stop him. Why? Because the reward is bigger. It's not just about the thrill of the moment, but the legacy. To create something unique, to inspire others, to leave behind proof that you dared to do what others wouldn't. The builder isn't just chasing a machine. He's chasing immortality. Maybe not the kind written in history books, but the kind that lives in the memories of everyone who witnessed it. The kind that makes someone, somewhere, whisper years later, "Remember that guy who ran a jet engine in his garage?" This experiment is a gamble, but it's a gamble with meaning. It's about testing limits, about proving courage, about showing the world that risk doesn't always end in disaster. Sometimes, risk is the doorway to the extraordinary. The fire that could burn you is the same fire that lights up the sky. The noise that could deafen you is the same noise that announces victory. Risk and reward aren't enemies, they're partners. Without one, the other cannot exist. In the end, that's the story of this jet engine. It's not just a machine roaring in a workshop. It's a symbol of humanity's eternal dance with risk. From the first sailors who left shore without knowing what lay beyond, to the astronauts who climbed into rockets that might never return, every great leap has carried risk. But without those leaps, we'd still be standing still. This experiment is just one more leap. And for those who witnessed it, they'll never forget the roar, the flames, the danger, or the courage it took to risk it all for a reward that money could never buy. When the last echoes of the jet engine fade, when the smoke drifts away and the heat begins to cool, the question that lingers in everyone's mind is not just, how did he do it? But, what happens next? Because experiments like this don't just exist in the present moment. They ripple outward, planting seeds for the future, and maybe, just maybe, this roaring jet engine in a dusty workshop is the spark that lights a fire far beyond what anyone expected. Think of it this way today. It's just one man with a vision, daring enough to strap a jet engine into a world where it doesn't belong. But tomorrow, that same daring could evolve into something bigger. What if this experiment inspires a generation of engineers who refuse to stay inside the lines? What if a student watching this video decides to dedicate their life to propulsion technology? What if an innovator somewhere sees this and thinks, why not hybridize jet thrust with electric motors? That's the power of these moments. They ripple forward like waves, shaping a future that hasn't even been imagined yet. The future doesn't come from safe, predictable ideas. It comes from experiments that look crazy in the moment, but turn into breakthroughs years later. The Wright brothers' fragile airplane was once seen as a toy. Early rockets were laughed at as fireworks. Even the first computers were dismissed as useless. But someone believed in them. Someone tried anyway, and the world was changed forever. Who's to say this jet engine experiment isn't another small step on that same path? In fact, you could argue that this is exactly how the future is built, by daring individuals who play with technology in unexpected ways. Big corporations and governments may have the money, but it's often the garage tinkerers, the outsiders, the passionate risk takers who push ideas in directions no one else considered. Today, it's a jet engine roaring in a workshop. Tomorrow, it might be a new kind of transportation. A vehicle that blends the raw thrust of jets with the control of wheels, or a new kind of power generator that repurposes aerospace tech for everyday use. The possibilities are endless because innovation rarely stops where it starts. And the future isn't just about machines, it's about people. This experiment shows the next generation that they don't have to wait for permission to dream. They don't need billion-dollar labs to test ideas. They just need passion, courage, and the willingness to fail until they succeed. That's a powerful lesson, one that could shape not just technology, but culture itself. The future will belong to those who dare, and this jet engine experiment is a reminder of that truth. But there's also another angle, the future of curiosity. Too often, people grow up and stop asking, what if? They stop experimenting, stop building, stop believing in the impossible. But watching a jet engine roar to life in the hands of someone who refused to give up reignites that question. It makes people wonder again. And curiosity, once sparked, is unstoppable. It spreads, it multiplies, it transforms. That's how progress is made, not by answers but by questions. Of course, the future is never guaranteed. This experiment could fade into obscurity, remembered only as a thrilling stunt. But even if it does, the impact will still exist in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Somewhere, someone will carry that inspiration forward, building on it, reshaping it, reimagining it. The future doesn't need everyone to notice, it only needs a few. And if even one person is changed by this moment, then the future has already shifted. So maybe the true reward of this jet engine experiment isn't the fire, the noise, or even the spectacle. Maybe it's the future it sparks. A future where people dare to dream bigger, build bolder, and risk more for the chance to change the world. When the flames die down and the smoke clears, the sound that lingers isn't just the roar of the engine. It's the echo of possibility. And that echo can travel further than any jet ever could. That's the real legacy of this moment, not the machine itself, but the future it dares to imagine.